Stu, I want you to listen to this story from the New York Times and just help me out a bit, will you?
Sure, of course.
Nestled in a dense forest, the Ukrainian military base appears abandoned and destroyed. Its command center a burned-out husk, a casualty of a Russian missile barrage early in the war. But that is only what's above ground. Not far away, a secret passageway descends to a subterranean bunker where teams of Ukrainian soldiers track Russian spy satellites and eavesdrops on communications and conversations between Russian commanders. On one screen, a red line followed the route of an explosive drone as they thread it through the Russian air defenses from a point in central Ukraine to target in the Russian city of Rostov. Now, Stu, I don't think this is a secret when it's in the New York Times. But my first question here is, why would the New York Times be talking about something that's just a few yards away from a military base? It's probably not hard to, narrow this down. From a military base where there's hardened bunkers, tracking everything, and sending the drones that they're trying to stop. Why would the New York Times put that in here?
It seems
just a good story.
It seems like a bad move. If you want Ukraine to be victorious in a war, you wouldn't necessarily want to tip your hand to the Russians. You're right. Obviously, they don't give specifics exactly, but again, this is probably something they could pretty easily narrow down. So, so why would you do this?
So now the next paragraph comes in. The Russian underground the underground bunker built to replace the destroyed command center in the months after Russia's invasion is a secret. It's not secret if I'm reading about it in the news. Is a secret nerve center of the Ukrainian military. But there's also one more secret that now that we're printing it is no longer a secret. The base is almost fully financed and partially equipped by the CIA. General Serhiy Dvorsky said 110%. Really? 110%? That's true? It took root a decade ago, coming together in fits and starts under three very different U.S. presidents, pushing forward by key individuals who often took daring risks. It had transformed Ukraine, whose intelligence agencies were long seen as thoroughly compromised by Russia, into one of Washington's most trusted and important intelligence partners against the Kremlin today. The CIA helped train a new generation of Ukrainian spies who operate inside of Russia, across Europe and in Cuba and other places where the Russians have a large presence. Well, that's helpful. Can we reveal the knock list too? The relationship is so ingrained that the CIA officers remained at a remote location in western Ukraine when the Biden administration evacuated U.S. personnel in the weeks before Russia invaded. During the invasion, the officers relayed critical intelligence, including where Russia was planning strikes and which weapons systems they would use. The head of the Ukrainian Domestic Intelligence Agency said, without the CIA, there would be no way for us to resist the Russians or to beat them. Oh. Now, Stu, why would the New York Times print this?
Maybe they're desirous of World War III. Could be one potential explanation. Like you're trying to spark a flame that will result in all of us being lit on fire in a fiery explosion across the entire globe.
What would make you to jump to something like that?
Well, it seems like if the basic argument is actually we've been spying on Russia through Ukraine this entire time, and these suspicions of Vladimir Putin that the West is using Ukraine for these types of purposes are have a pretty viable foundation of truth. That seems to be a terrible, terrible thing to be throwing into the New York Times. Now, look, I would assume the Russian military is aware of a lot of these things already. I mean, this is obviously their job and their business. But I don't think drawing more attention to it is a good idea.
So let me ask you, it's implied, and pretty much everybody knows, that Russia and China are hacking into our systems, that Russia has hacked into our power grid, et cetera, et cetera. But what does Putin say about it in the Russian media?
Nothing.
Not true.
Right.
That's not true. We don't do that. Okay. What if it came out in Pravda and it quoted the head of the operation in Russia, and it said, absolutely, we have been targeting their critical infrastructure for years now. We have them on the ropes. And you know who told us all of this? Canada. Canada has been working with us to make sure the Niagara Falls power plant is the first to fall. What would we do? We are headed for World War III. Let me give you a couple of stories that show that this is wanted by too many people. This is from the Financial Times this weekend. Jens Stoltenberg said that there was no doubt that Ukraine would join NATO as Western leaders gathered in Kyiv to pledge support and mark the second anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. The NATO chief said on Saturday that Russia President Vladimir Putin started this war because he wanted to close NATO's door, but he has achieved the exact opposite. Ukraine is now closer to NATO than ever before. He said NATO is helping Kyiv to make its forces more and more interoperable. Ukraine will join NATO. It is not a question of if, but of when, he insisted. Okay, so let me see. On the same weekend, we have NATO. What Putin said was the real problem. They were going to expand NATO to places like Ukraine. Yes, we're going to do that. We're going to do that now. And also, that's the same weekend that the New York Times reports there's secret underground bunkers run by the CIA. Okay.
Great.
Now, if, again, this was about Canada and Russia said they're expanding their presence and they're going to put military in Canada on our border, and they admitted to, doing secret operations with Canada to be able to destroy us, what would we do? Mr. Orban came out, Viktor Orban of Hungary. He declared an end to the months-long spat with Sweden over the expansion of NATO, saying that a visit by his Swedish counterparts had rebuilt trust and paved the way for Hungarian parliament to vote on Monday, that's yesterday, to ratify the Nordic nations' membership in NATO. We're ready to fight for each other, to give our lives for one another, he said. Really? The sudden warming of relations between the two countries followed a decision by Sweden to provide Hungary with 4 Swedish-made Gripen fighter jets, in addition to the 14 its Air Force already uses, and a promise that Saab, the maker of the warplanes, will open an artificial intelligence research center in Hungary. Okay, so that's good. That's good. Why are we headed toward war? Why?
By the way, Hungary did approve that in Sweden. That what you mentioned, 188 to 6.
Yeah, I believe Hungary was the one saying, "Let's not piss off the bear." Why would we be talking about expanding NATO? I believe I've heard Orban say those very things. Why would we do that? 4 jets? Really? That's all it took was 4 jets? I don't think so. There is a game being played here that I really don't like. And our country is becoming a little crazy. Let me give you this story. The Iranian-backed Hamas terrorist group praised a far-left extremist who lit himself on fire outside of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. on Sunday and used his death to promote Islamic terrorist propaganda. Aaron Bushnell, a low-level software engineer with the U.S. Air Force, screamed "Free Palestine" as flames engulfed his body after he doused himself with a flammable liquid and then lit himself on fire. He later died from injuries. Bushnell repeated terrorist propaganda in the moments leading up to the incident, falsely claiming that what was happening inside Gaza was genocide and calling Israel colonizers. Now that sounds like a far-left radical, doesn't it? Oh, I forgot. We're not looking for hard-left radicals in the military. Only those Christian nationalists and those who want to have insurrection in the United States. Now, here's why this is so bad. Let me take you first to what Cornel West tweeted. Let us never forget the extraordinary courage and commitment of Brother Aaron Bushnell, who died for truth and justice. I pray for his precious loved ones. Let us rededicate ourselves to genuine solidarity with the Palestinians undergoing genocidal attacks in real time. I want you to mark this place in time right now. This truly is a mile marker. This makes Aaron into some kind of suicide bomber when, they'll be rewarded in heaven. We are not a culture that rewards suicide or suicidal acts, especially for politics. Instead of one of the 50,000 plus Americans who committed suicide in the last year, instead of mourning another lost life, lost to mental illness, we're confusing suicide with martyrdom. Those who kill themselves for ideology should not be praised. But that's exactly what Hamas said. That's exactly what Cornel West said. Praising ideology over human life. That's not a Rubicon we care to cross. But we're crossing it right now.